Okay, so now we're gonna be talking about the process of interpreting. So we're gonna be taking a practical and theoretical overview. Before we defined already what interpretation is, or what the different type of interpretations are, and today we're gonna be focusing on simultaneous interpretation. Okay, that's gonna be our focus now. So basically, we have this little guy, all right? So let's say that that guy is a speaker. Okay, so we have this guy here. This guy is a speaker. He has a message for the audience. So we have the audience there. And there is a message that needs to be transmitted. Normal? No problem. The problem here is that there is a barrier, which is language. The speaker doesn't share the language with the audience. They speak different languages. So in that case, communication is not possible. But then we have this little guy that comes into scene here. And this guy is the interpreter, okay? So what he does is that he makes communication possible. How he does it? Well, basically, he removes the barrier of language by changing the direction of the message. So the message, instead of going directly to the audience, it will go through him, okay? So the message goes from the speaker to the interpreter. And then this little guy executes his magic and he executes all this process. This is what happens. This is the process that an interpreter goes through when he is interpreting simultaneously. So we have the message. This little guy listen to what the speaker is saying. That's the first step, right? Then he starts translating in his mind. And this process here, we'll see it later. There's a whole process there, but he translates the message in his mind. He then shapes and adapts the message into the output language, right? Because one thing is translation, and then we need to make sure that everything is correct, the grammar is correct, etc. Then, once he has the complete version of the message, he renders the interpretation through his microphone. But, okay, you might think, okay, that's it. Mission accomplished. No. After he has rendered the message, he has to monitor his own speech to make sure that it is properly transmitted. So, because probably you will experience this when you go into the booth and you put on the headset and you start interpreting. If you have the chance to record yourself, you can record yourself with a cell phone and then listen to that recording. You'll notice that when you have your ears covered and you're not able to listen to your voice clearly, you'll start making mistakes on the way you articulate, in the way you pronounce, because we need to monitor ourselves to make sure that we articulate words properly. So that's what the interpreter does. He usually when we are interpreting, we have a headset. I don't have some available here, but usually we will leave one ear a little bit free from the headset in order to listen to our voice. And in that way, we will be monitoring our speech. So we will have to monitor what we have said. We have to listen to what is being said. Well, the speaker, because the speaker is continue speaking. We do all this while the speaker continues rendering more and more information. Then occasionally we will have to correct our own output. Why? Because as I said before, sometimes we make some mistakes in pronunciation. We probably didn't complete a word and we have to correct ourselves immediately. And then the process goes on and on, right? So all this process is executed while we keep getting new information from the speaker. So, but that's how the message is sent to the audience and we make communication possible. Now, there is this author, Coakley. He proposed that interpretation goes through 7 different stages. And what we have here are the different stages of the Coakley model. So Coakley says, hey, when we are interpreting, there is a whole process going on in our brain. And there are different stages, right? So the first stage is the message reception. Basically, this is the act of physically receiving the source message through the appropriate channel. We can have as a reminder the word perceive. That's when we perceive the message. So basically, this is a physical process. It's when we physically receive the message. So you know that the sounds, they are vibrations, right? So those vibrations, they come into our ear and we have there some things in our ear that they are capable of catching all the vibration and they transform that into sound for our brain, right? So that is the physical process when the vibration comes into our ear and it is detected as sound, right? However, right now, I am listening to my voice, I am listening to my cell phone, which is vibrating, I'm listening to my chair that makes noise when I move, I'm listening to some birds that are outside where I am right now, and I am listening to a great variety of sounds. A car that is parking in front of the building, I can hear, I don't know, a truck that's passing by. You know, I can get so many sounds simultaneously. And that is the act of physically receiving the sound. So the first stage is receiving the sound. The second stage is the preliminary processing. Okay, as I was mentioning, we might be getting a great variety of sounds. However, we go through a preliminary processing where we start, or our brain start discriminating. They said that sounds not useful, that's not useful. Oh, that one is useful. So let's focus on that one. So our brain starts focusing on what's important. From all the sounds that are coming to my ear, the brain starts focusing in one specific one. And that is the act of recognizing the source message as a linguistic signal. And it's not only that our brain focuses on one sound, but it starts saying, hey, that's not only a sound. That's a code and I can understand it. I can decode the code. There is a message in there. So our brain is detecting that there is a message within the sound. So as a reminder, we have the word recognize. We first perceive and then we recognize the sound. Then we go into a short-term message retention. This is the act of storing enough the source signal to achieve an understanding of the message. Basically, our ear receives the vibration. Our brain detects that there is an important sound and that the sound has a code that I can understand. And then our brain starts, processing that information. So all that message that was coming through the sounds, our brain starts processing it and tries to understand it. And that is chunk. When we divide all that into information, small information for our brain to retain. After we go through the third stage, we go into the fourth. And this is interesting because it goes through a semantic intent realized. Our brain detects that there is a message because there is a code. However, there is a lot of pragmatic information that is also detected by our brain. So, in the fourth stage, we have the act of understanding the source message. Importantly, as Coakley states, ideally, of course, the semantic intent of the message realized by the interpreter is that originally intended by the speaker. Because there is some information that might not be transmitted into words, but in the way that the speaker is transmitting the message. So all that information has to be determined, identified, and decoded by our brain. For example, I'm gonna give you an example of this. Let's have the phrase, "Wow, how beautiful you look today." Okay? That's a positive message, right? Isn't it? Well, how beautiful you look today. But let's set a scenario here. Let's imagine that we are with friends and suddenly one of our friends comes and for some reason she's dressing very funny, right? So this person comes and I said, "Wow, how beautiful you look today, huh?" Okay, the words are positive, but how about the way I say it? Don't you think that there's a little bit of, I don't know, of a twist? Maybe I'm not wanting to transmit that she actually looks beautiful. Probably what I'm trying to say is, "Hey, you don't look well today," or "You look a bit ridiculous today," or "Hey, you look funny." So, because it's important the way we say things. It's not only what we say, but how we say it, right? So, and that is something that we as interpreter, we need to identify. Our brain has to identify the semantic intent of the speaker, right? Ideally, we are able to capture the original intent of the speaker. And then once we go through that, we go into the semantic equivalent determined. This is when we start making the translation process. We start looking for terms, we start looking for equivalents, etc. Right? So we start, looking for the right words to say that into the target language, and that is to analyze, right? Then we have this syntactic message formulation, the act of mentally fashioning an equivalent target message. So we need to make sure that we put the message in the correct structure, because in English we might have, for example, the White House, the White House. In Spanish, Blanca Casa. However, we need to put it in the correct structure, Casa Blancas. So we need to change the order. So that's what we do in this stage, and that is to formulate. At the end, we have the message production, which is the act of articulating the target message, which is production, right? So these are the stages of Coakley. We'll see it in a graph right now. And I have here that some of these stages that happen in the source language, there's one that happens, it's very neutral, and then we have 3 that happens in the target language. So the last stages happen in the target language. So the first one is perceive, right? When we receive the message, we physically receive the sounds in our ears. That's the first stage. The second stage is when our brain starts detecting that there is a sound that he has to focus on, because that sound or the sounds carry a message in a code that we understand, and that's recognition. Then our brain start chunking the information, start putting it into pieces that our brain start processing and understanding it. So we start understanding the sound, which are words maybe, and then we go into the semantic intent realized. This is something that doesn't happen in a specific language, because it's when the message is just a bunch of information that we need to understand, that our brain has to understand it, right? But here is where we need to understand what the purpose of the speaker is with that message. And then we go into analyzing. So we start looking for equivalent in the target language. Once we have the equivalent, we go into the formulation of the message, which is when we create a syntactic message formulation, basically. We make sure that the grammar is correct, etc., etc. Once we formulate the message, there is a pre-production monitor, so we make sure that everything is correct and that it's ready to go, and then we go with the production. After the production, there is another monitor, right? As we learned before in a previous slide, we have to monitor because we need to make sure that our output is correct. You know, there are some times in which we are going very fast and probably we don't articulate properly a word or a phrase, and then we have to, you know, make sure that we correct ourselves as needed. So that's basically the Cochlear model. If you have any questions, there is a forum, you can leave a comment and I'll be happy to respond there, guys. Thank you.